Is it really an update? I don't know, but it is something extra that we can add on to the conversation, so we are, in this video, referring back to a topic that we had discussed a few days ago. We dove into the Vancouver Canucks and the Buffalo Sabres because there was an idea floating around asking whether or not the Vancouver Canucks could target Buffalo Sabres defenseman Bowen Byram in a trade. Yeah, that was a pretty nutty idea. But as with all Vancouver Canucks trade ideas, everything that gets talked about for a reason. And this was a pretty good one, which is why I made the video about it, going out there and talking about it, and based off of the comment section, y'all had a fun time discussing this one too. Bowen Byram is a former 4th overall pick from the 2019 NHL Entry Draft, the proclaimed best defenseman of that entire draft class, and a guy that is poised for great things at the National Hockey League level. He has played some pretty meaningful hockey over the past few years, split between Colorado and Buffalo, and this season the guy's on pace for 50 points, with 11 points in 18 games right now. He's also on pace for 14 goals, which would be pretty good for a defenseman that I think many people would say isn't necessarily supposed to be the best defenseman on the team. I mean, he's getting played like it for sure. Just look at the amount of ice time the guy gets. Oh my goodness. 22, 27, 24, 32-minute games in there. Okay, some of them went to overtime, so it's a little bit misleading, but Buffalo is in an interesting spot. They've got Owen Power, they've got Rasmus Dahlin, they've got other guys signed on to long-term deals like Matthias Samuelsson, and with this D-core in place, obviously it's a little bit younger, but there's so much potential, so much star power to be, maybe even star power currently, with what the Sabres have. And Bowen Byram, as a guy who might be a little bit tangled up in that fray, his name entered Vancouver Canucks trade discourse over the past week, which is why we are going over to BuffaloNews.com and reading Mike Harrington's response to everything that was talked about. Inside the NHL, Brooks Orpik had the best seat and best results from the Penguins-Capitals rivalry. Yeah, you gotta believe me, this article goes out there and actually does talk about the Buffalo Bowen Byram stuff. It's just titled differently. It's going to be linked in the description as well if you want to go ahead and read this, but if you go over into the piece, you will find some very interesting Vancouver Canucks conversations. So, let's go out there and read this over here. Scroll down into the body of the piece. Take a look at this. You have to scroll down into the trade winds blowing part of the piece, which goes over some various NHL trade rumors and ideas. Sabres GM Kevyn Adams continued to be a hot topic at the GM meetings in Toronto, with several outlets pointing to Adams as one of the busiest talkers in the league. Out of those rumors has come some absurd trade chatter out of the Vancouver Canucks, trying to pry defenseman Bowen Byram from the Sabres. Adams is looking to improve his depth and not subtract from it, and Byram has just been promoted to top pair alongside of Rasmus Dahlin. One name Adams should be looking for in this view is forward from Nashville Gustav Nyquist. The 4-time 20-goal scorer is in the final year of his deal with a cap hit just under $3.2 million, and his 5 goals put him at a 24-goal pace for the season. Adams flipped Matt Savoy for Ryan McLeod over the summer, and you wonder what kind of other moves like that are out there to be made. So, yeah, BuffaloNews.com, right? The article is from a local beat reporter going out there and saying that it's pretty ludicrous and nutty and crazy and not realistic that Vancouver would be able to get Bowen Byram. Which is a shame, but it isn't surprising. I mean, come on. I get it, there's a lot of affinity for Bowen Byram. A lot of us, myself included, that grew up here in BC, we like this guy because he's one of us. He grew up in Cranbrook. He played for the Vancouver Giants. He had one of the best WHL Defender playoff series runs that we've ever seen in his draft-eligible season. He was fantastic. And so, obviously, bringing the local BC guy who did amazing things with Vancouver hockey over to the Vancouver Canucks is a target. But realistically, if this guy's going out there and playing first pair alongside Rasmus Dahlin, he's looking good in the process, and he's on pace for 14 goals on the year, yeah, you bet your behind the price for this dude's gonna be huge. And when it comes to the Vancouver Canucks, you have to think that there isn't really a trade idea here that would make sense for Vancouver when you think about what Buffalo would be interested in acquiring. The article even says here that Kevyn Adams, the Buffalo Sabres, they'd be interested in adding some scoring forwards, maybe a guy like Nyquist out of Nashville. So if the Vancouver Canucks are interested in trading for this guy, they would need to provide some significant value in return. Maybe somebody who is at the same caliber of a Gustav Nyquist or whomever. You think about what the Buffalo Sabres traded away to get Bowen Byram in the first place. Hey, that was Casey Mittelstadt, a guy who admittedly has been given a much bigger role in Colorado now because of the injury situation there, but a still valuable piece nonetheless. Vancouver, if they had any assets, which they do, let's just say that right here. If they had any assets that were worth the same amount of value as a Casey Mittelstadt, there's no way in hell Patrik Allvin is going to trade that away at this point. Sure, you're getting Bowen Byram, a guy who will definitely stabilize the top defenseman core on this team. But at the same time, are they willing to pay the price? Now here's the thing. I did just say, Patrik Allvin's not going to trade away any one of their forwards that is at that caliber to make this sort of deal work. But if you were to argue that Patrik Allvin would, I honestly would listen to it. And here's why. I think a lot of the Vancouver Canucks fan base has sort of felt this over the past few months that, yeah, the Canucks did a good job bolstering the forward core in free agency. There's a lot of depth, there's a lot of potential there. The only problem is, at the moment, a lot of these guys aren't playing up to that potential. JT Miller, he's been looking pretty bad. Dakota Joshua, well, he's just coming back from cancer. So I'll sit here and complain all I want about Jeremy Swayman and Connor Bedard and all these other guys not performing for my fantasy team, but Dakota Joshua, hey, I'm sorry, buddy. We can't complain about him yet. He's not been doing all too well, but that's because he just came back from cancer. Other than that, the Canucks have some pretty good guys throughout the rest of their lineup. Pia Suter is a valuable, adjustable guy. You can throw him anywhere. Jake DeBrusk is trying to get his feet under him. He's getting going slowly. Danton Heinen, all-around versatile player. Kiefer Sherwood, agitator, physical guy, hitting guy, and a goal scorer. There are a lot of guys on the Vancouver Canucks forward core that there are so limited spots available. Like, you think about all the names that have been rotating around in the final spot. We've seen Karamaki, Ratu, Baines, Oman, all these guys tossed around there, even Daniel Sprong to an extent. So if you think about it, how does the idea sound of Vancouver actually trading away one of these top-tier guys? Let's say a DeBrusk or a Heinen Plus or something like that, to get a player like Bowen Byram to bolster up the D. Essentially, it would be doing what a lot of Canucks fans said the Canucks should have done, which was, instead of extending Tyler Myers and signing Danton Heinen, use that money to get some better defensemen. Instead of signing Heinen and another guy like Jake DeBrusk, just bolster up the D instead. You can still keep all the other signings, the Kiefer Sherwoods of the world. You can still give your tryouts to guys like Karamaki and Ratu. But if you wanted to maximize your cap space, I mean, it's tough to go out there and say that a guy like Danton Heinen, who's making a pretty reasonable amount of money at $2 million, playing on the fourth or the third line, is a productive move. I mean, it's not that bad to have forward depth, but if you need defense, maybe sacrificing some of that forward depth to get a defender makes sense. Maybe it's to the magnitude that wouldn't still a Bowen Byram trade. Who really knows? I think the only sort of idea that would make sense in this situation would be like, Jake DeBrusk or something, but of course, there's a very distinct human element to it as well. Would Vancouver be in a position to trade away a guy they just signed for some sort of defensive help after committing this amount of money to him and giving the clauses and everything, no moves, no trades, whatever? There obviously wouldn't really be a good reason to do that. It would just build up a lot of bad faith from the Vancouver POV. Sure, you could say it comes out of a position of necessity, but is that really enough to shake off whatever sort of reputation you'd be getting from that kind of move? I'd say no. So at the end of the day, even though Bowen Byram to Vancouver is a ridiculous idea that I think is awesome to talk about in theory, there really isn't that much fuel to diving into what would make it work. And while there is a possibility, I would say, that a trade like this is possible, maybe it's like 5, 6, 7% possible, the Canucks are in too tight of a spot to even make the trade work, therefore invalidating it and making this conversation obsolete. So yeah, thanks. It took us 9 minutes to get there, but that's the conclusion I'm going to leave y'all with. You can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, whether or not you agree or disagree. Is it worth talking about Vancouver acquiring Bowen Byram, and what do you think about this update from the Buffalo Beat talking about how it's ridiculous? Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.